Hi, I'm Father Jim Forson, and I'd like to offer you some reflections on the gospel of this fifth Sunday in Lent. I think, we've all heard that phrase, the best things in life are free. Says who? They're not free at all. There's a real cost to pay. And we all know that some things in life cost a lot, tickets for the Super Bowl or for a Taylor Swift concert. We all know you're going to pay a lot for that. Or if you want to buy, a Lamborghini Muller and a sports car, you're going to pay a lot of money for those things, and we get that. But the best things in life, they cost a lot. There's a big price to pay for that. And what would be the best things in life? I guess, for example, would be a happy family. Well, if you have a happy family, it didn't just happen. You have a happy family because somebody paid a big price for that. And that price began with things as simple as changing diapers and sitting up with sick babies throughout the night, and countless trips to ER, and cooking dinner and packing lunches and scrimping money for college education and driving kids back and forth to soccer matches. And all of that is what creates a happy family. Spouses forgiving one another and biting their tongues with each other and sometimes having to put up with each other. That's what makes a happy family. And that's quite a price to pay, and be paid over years. And if people do pay that price for years, then yeah, you have a happy family. Or what are the best things in life? Health. And except for those few that are just genetically blessed, just about anybody, if you want to have relatively good health, you're going to have to work for it. You have to watch your diet, you have to exercise, and then later in life, countless doctor visits and taking pills and trips to the hospital and all that kind of stuff to maintain your health. You're going to pay a price. So today in the gospel, there are Greeks in Jerusalem who say to the apostles, Andrew and Philip, we want to see Jesus. And if they want to see Jesus, they're going to have to pay a price. If they want that best thing in life, it's going to cost them. These Greeks undoubtedly were either Jewish people living in Greek territory, or they were Greeks who had converted to Judaism. Well, they were in Jerusalem because of the high holy days, as was Jesus and his disciples. And undoubtedly, with all of the excitement that was happening in Jerusalem, Jesus had just had his triumphant entry that we will celebrate on Palm Sunday. With all of that excitement, they undoubtedly had heard about Jesus, and they wanted to see him for themselves, and which is why they approached the apostles who approached Jesus. And Jesus' response is kind of an odd one. On hearing that these Greeks wanted to see him, his answer is, unless the grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it remains just a grain of wheat. And then he goes on to say, you have to lose your life in order to gain life. His response to this desire to see him is one that evokes death. Things are going to have to start dying. And then he concludes with the image of the Son of Man will be lifted up above the earth, that is to say, hanging on a cross, and then all will see him. And so if you want to see Jesus, the price to pay is what he paid. That is the sacrificing of oneself for others. And then he says something so curious. As he contemplates his own death, saying, the hour has come for the Son of Man to die, he says, Father, glorify your name. Which, when you think about it, is odd. Because who in the world, when they're seeing someone crucified, would ever be tempted to give God glory? To be able to see that horrible death and say, isn't God great? Doesn't he do wonderful things? Usually a crucifixion would evoke confusion, or we'd be saying to God, God, how could you? Why did you let this happen to anyone, to say nothing of your own son? So what was Jesus talking about? What did he mean when he said, Father, glorify your name, or may my death cause people to give you glory? And even more strangely, he then hears in response the voice from heaven saying, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. What is that all about? And I think what it's about is this. Several years ago, I was called to the bedside of a man who was soon to die, and he was suffering terribly from cancer. And all of the medication that he was taking to try to cut the pain could only cut so much pain. So this poor man, he was in agony. And as I came to pray with him, he was telling me that he had made a decision not long before. Because of all the agony that he was in, he was tempted to have assisted suicide. But he decided not to. And he decided not to because he didn't want his family to have to carry the burden of that in the story they would eventually have to tell about him. That when people would ask, how did he die? That his family would have to either tell a half-truth, well, he died of cancer, or have to tell an awful truth. That is, he committed suicide, or they want to call it medically induced death, or euthanasia, or whatever phrase you want to put to it. But he killed himself. And he didn't want his family to have to tell that kind of story, to carry that kind of burden. And he didn't want them to think of him in that way, and that be part of his story. He wanted them to remember him as somebody who was brave, and maybe, in thinking back on it, would reflect and realize that he suffered for their sake. And, when I heard him telling this, I was so moved by it. And I just thought to myself, what courage and what self-sacrifice that he is going through all this pain for the sake of his family. And it caused me to say to God, God, your grace is amazing. And I think that's what it means when it says, may God get the glory. May people glorify God's name, because I sure did after seeing how this man lived the last of his life. And I prayed that God would give me that same kind of courage and that same kind of strength, that if ever so challenged, I would have that way of living my life, end of my life, for the sake of others, as he did. And that's the price that we have to pay for that good thing in life. We have to be that grain of wheat that falls to the earth. We have to lose our life for the sake of others. We die so that they can live. And that means that we die out of love for them. And it's out of love that we change those diapers. It's out of love that we pack those lunches. It's out of love that we drive the kids to the soccer match. It's out of love that we forgive our spouses. We do all of that out of love in hopes that somehow, some way, that sacrifice will create in that other person deep love. And then they would be able to say, God, you are great. Thank you. I've been blessed. And that's what I believe God meant when he said, I have glorified my name in the life and death and soon resurrection of Christ. And I will glorify it again with that man at whose bedside I sat. That's the price we pay. To fall to the earth and die out of love for others.